Hello, hello, hello. Um, Hope everybody's doing well. I am just going to give a heads up of how this is sort of going to work during class time. During class time, I'm using YouTube Live. Basically, what I'm doing is going through any of the work that I posted that day. So I'm going through the slides to sort of break them down a little bit. I'm also going through the work that you're supposed to be doing and giving you some heads up, aka some answers. So it's a good idea to pay attention and to sign in and look at this. So even if you're not watching me live, that's fine. If you're not watching me live, the only reason I'm doing YouTube live instead of just recording is that if you have something to ask me in real time, I'm here. But the way I work this is I will go through the slides and I will go through the worksheet. Now, when you're on, I'm not going to be on this tab too much. I'm going to come back and look at this tab to see if anybody said anything. If anybody had any specific questions, I'll come back to this and check periodically. But I'm going to be on my other tabs, which I have open now. I'm not screen sharing. You can't screen share on YouTube Live. I don't want to do Zoom and I don't want to do Hangouts because that turns into talk, and it's not as structured. So I want to get the information out, give you the heads up on the work that you're supposed to do. And I'm thinking tonight, I'm going to Zoom and hang out, but that's when I want to just have fun and talk to you guys and goof around a little bit. I don't want to goof around too much during these sessions because there's not a lot of time. So I'm just here to break down the information for you in case, some of you may not need it broken down, and that's fine. This will be on the classroom. It's recorded, so it'll be on the classroom. Click the link and it will show it to you at any time. So tell your friends, even if they couldn't sign on, there's some NJIT people going on. I think that's over now, but there's a bunch of that stuff happening. And, sometimes you just can't get on. Sometimes you're at work. Sometimes you're doing something else. So that's why when I use this, it records, it stays, and we're good to go. All right. So there should be three things you have open right now. You should have this open, and you should also have your slides, and you should have the handout that I gave you that is titled, I think it's titled something like AG Explorer from Tractor Supply. That's the work that you're going to do, the worksheet. How was I going to explain this? I feel like I'm forgetting something. All right. So, I assume, since I put this work up this morning, I assume that in the first half hour of this scheduled time, which was 10 or 9:30 to 10, you opened the materials, you looked at the slides, and you opened the worksheet and you looked at it. There were directions. Those directions said to watch a video. So if you watch that video before you see me, now things will make much more sense. If not, you'll have to go back and watch that 6-minute video. But we'll get to that when we get to that. I want to go right in on the slides. So the way I do this is I go to my tab. Again, I'm not going to be seeing this. I'll come back to the live tab once in a while. But I really just want you to follow along on the tabs on your computer for the slides. So you should have the slides up now. Very first slide is land and water use. It says Unit 4. This is lesson 2, and what we're discussing today is the different types of agriculture. How do they compare to each other? So there's different ways to grow food, to grow things. So that is what we're going to go through. Slide 2 is nothing but an agenda. Slide 3, 4, 5, and 6 are simply review slides from previous material. So I'll let you look at that on your own. And then we get to slide 7. Slide 7 is the objective. The objective is to be able, by the end of this, to be able to compare and contrast different types of agriculture and to see the differences in their land and water usage. There is a YouTube video link right there that shows you a time lapse of corn growing. It's actually just pretty cool. I love time lapse videos. So you can check that out. When we move to slide 8 has an interesting fact that worldwide, more than 99.7% of human food comes from the land, is grown on land, right? So when you think of most of our planet being covered by ocean, a lot of fish, a lot of sea life, that only equates to 0.3% of our food supply. So agriculture is important. It's one of the most important things. Growing food, producing food, enough of it, growing it efficiently, growing it healthy. It's all very, very important. That was slide 8. Slide 9. How do different types of agriculture compare to each other? Excuse me, my coffee's still hot. So on slide 9. there's differences. There's comparisons that you can make between different types of agriculture, and that just means where you're growing it, how you're growing it, what the climate is, what the geography is, right? So there's a bunch of different things you can do. People grow food in many different ways. So the first statement here: each acre of tillable land is not equally productive. That means tillable land means land that you can dig into and plant seeds and grow stuff. So each plot, each acre of that tillable land, it's not equally productive. Some of it will have more nutrients in it than others. Some you can grow certain types of crops on. Some you can only grow crops to a certain height. There's a lot of different things. Land isn't land. That's what that statement means. Dirt isn't dirt. The dirt is very different in different areas of the world, in different areas of a country, in different areas of a city, in different areas of just a few acres. Sometimes the land is different. So there's a lot of different factors that come into that. Irrigation practices, fertilizers, erosion problems all contribute to just how much land is needed in order to produce food. Very true. So what that's saying is, depending on where you are, how much you want to grow, how fast you want to grow, that all makes a difference, right? Irrigation practices. If I have a farm next to a river or a water source, I don't have to worry about watering my crops. It's right there. But if I have a farm that's miles and miles and miles from any water source and it doesn't rain a lot, then I have a problem. Then I have to irrigate. Then I have to bring in pipes to pipe in water, or I have to cut a tributary, a small path from a river to bring water down to my farm. You can't do that on anybody else's land. It has to be your land. So the more you have to irrigate, the more land you need. So there's a bunch of different issues there. The other 3 bullet points I'll let you read on your own. They're just about diet and about different countries and how the agriculture compares in different countries. So I'm moving over to slide 10. It says, how do different types of agriculture compare to each other? So it's all comparable based on a lot of different factors or variables. One of them is available resources and constraints, right? Are you constrained? Is the place where you're going to grow food constrained by mountain ranges? Is it constrained by water? You can only grow so far. You can only grow so much. Maybe the terrain, right? The available resources. Is it raining? Is it easy to get equipment to your farm? Is equipment readily available? Can you irrigate properly? So all those resources make a difference. Where it is and what the weather is like obviously makes a difference, right? That is why we grow different things in different parts of the world, because the climate dictates, and that's a scary thing, because the climate dictates where we grow and what we grow. If the climate changes, the climate is going to dictate that we have to grow or not grow different things in different areas, right? There's a lot of places on the planet due to climate change now that we can't grow crops that we grew 20 years ago. That's a problem. That's going to diminish the food supply unless we find something else that can grow in that new climate. So geography and climate makes a very big difference. Government policies. There's a lot of government policies. You can't grow this. You can only grow this much of this. You can't grow this. You can't grow it here. You can't grow it there. There's a lot of different laws and legislation that dictate what you can and cannot grow and how you farm and how you don't farm. So there's some government agencies which make sure that you don't use too many fertilizers. So if you're trying to grow a bunch, that comes down to the philosophy on the last part of this slide. If you are someone that says, heck, I just want to make a lot of money and I just want to grow a lot of food and I'll use whatever fertilizers I want, but the government policy is you can only use this much, that's a problem. That's a constraint, right? So there's different types of issues that impact agriculture in many different ways. So we're moving to slide 11. Slide 11 talks about the first main part of agriculture, the first main example of agriculture. That's monoculture. Mono means one, right? So when you're talking about monoculture, you're talking about growing a single crop over a wide area for a lot of years. So you're growing the same thing in the same place for a long time. This is what you see when you're driving through the country. You see cornfields, you see wheat fields, you see that kind of thing. As you're reading through the slide at the bottom, you'll see that although that's a good way to make a lot of food quickly, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. We talked about biodiversity last week. Biodiversity is when you have many different species in a specific area. What that does is that ensures survival of many of the species. So in a monoculture agriculture system, if you're growing corn and all of a sudden a pest or a disease comes along that can kill that corn, it's eventually going to be able to kill your entire crop. All your food's going to be gone, right? So any food that you were selling for profit, any food that you were selling for your family, you no longer have. Wipes out the whole thing. So that's not a wonderful idea, but it is done. The way it's done, and this is well, that's slide 13. All right, I'm on slide 12 now. Let's go to slide 12. So what? And another problem with that is not only the biodiversity aspect of it, but the fact that when you're growing the same thing on the same land over and over and over, your soil starts to diminish. The nutrients in your soil get reduced, and eventually that dirt won't be nutrient rich enough to grow that crop. Right? When you grow things, you use nitrogen, you use phosphorus. Right? If you're growing the same thing over and over and over and over, you're using up that nitrogen and phosphorus in that dirt, and then you won't be able to yield as many or as successful crops. It increases the acidity in the soil. The soil gets real acidic, and that becomes a problem. Also, you have to worry about things like erosion, changing the landscape, and no longer making it feasible to grow a crop on that area. So there's some issues with this whole monoculture. The way they try to get around some of those issues is they'll change up the procedure a little bit. One of those on slide 13 is called shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation is when they sort of hop around their farm. So imagine they had 100 acres and they may farm on 30 acres this year because that's enough for their profit and for their food supply or whatever they need. So they will grow all their corn on 30 acres. And then the following year or 2 years later, they'll take all their crops and they'll hop to a different 30 acres on their farm and abandon that original 30 acres. And then after a couple of years, they'll move to the other 30% of their farm and they'll grow their corn there. What that's doing is it's giving the dirt some time to replenish itself as far as nutrients go. So the phosphorus and the nitrogen can come back into the soil. And by the time they rotate all the way through their plot of land, when they get back to that original dirt is rejuvenated. Only problem with that is you need a heck of a lot of land if you're going to grow a lot of food. If you're not growing a lot of food, then you can do it in smaller areas. But if you're trying to mass produce and be a farmer that sells and lives off of this, then you're going to need a big plot of land to do the shifting cultivation. So that could be a problem too. Slide 14 talks about something different. It talks about polyculture. Poly means many. So polyculture is when you use multiple crops in the same space. So you're not growing just corn, right? You're growing on your 50 acres, you're growing corn and soybeans and wheat, let's say. What that does, obviously, on slide, I'm going to skip these 15, 16 real quick on slide 17, what we've already talked about. Polyculture increases the diversity of the crops. So if something takes the corn out, you still got soybeans, you still got wheat, right? Another thing it does is, and the example here on slide 17 is China. China grows a lot of different types of corn. Rice, sorry. There's a lot of different types of rice, right? Long grain, all kinds of things. Asian climates are perfect for growing rice. So China grows a bunch of different varieties. That is also an example of polyculturing because it's a different genetic makeup, right? So think about apples. There's a bunch of different kinds of apples. Disease and pests will stick to one or two types of apples or rice or whatever. So if a disease comes or a pest comes that eats a certain type of rice, they typically leave the rest of them alone. So you don't lose all of your crops. That's the main point, that you always have something to eat, you always have something to sell. So polyculture is usually a good idea. If I go back now, that was slide 17. We've already talked about that. But if you go back to slide 15 and 16, this is where you have to do a little work. You have to find some diagrams of examples of polyculture. One of them is crop rotation. So crop rotation has to do similar with that. What crop rotation is, and I'll let you guys look these up on your own, but I'll just tell you crop rotation. Crop rotation is when you grow corn on this piece of dirt, and then next year you grow soybeans on this piece of dirt, and then the next year you grow wheat on that specific part of the dirt. What that does is corn uses different nutrients than soybeans. Soybeans uses different nutrients than wheat, so it doesn't wear out the dirt as fast. So if you crop rotate, if you change what you grow on the same piece of land, it makes that dirt last a lot longer. So that's one of the polyculture things. Slide 16, you'll see these other three things: companion planting, alley cropping, and beneficial weeds. Be careful when you Google beneficial weeds. You're going to get some interesting hits, but you'll figure that out. That's the slides. Guided practice, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go to the AG Explorer, the supply and demand activity that I posted. So I'm going to clip onto that tab now. Just come back and check. Okay, cool. Nobody said hi. You just watch it. That's cool. All right. So I am on the worksheet now. I am on the handout that says AG Explorer, supply and demand, vocabulary. We're going to go through a lot of this. Now, hopefully you watched the video. It's a 6-minute video. That video is of a guy talking about the supply and demand. He's using milk as an example, right? What happens when there's too much milk and nobody wants it? What happens when there's not enough milk and everybody wants it? What happens to the price of milk because of that stuff? So he goes through that. So he sort of explains supply and demand. The first half of it is him explaining supply and demand. The second half of the video is him talking about what's on the right-hand side of your worksheet, which is shifters, all right? So if you look at the left side, you see a word bank. Easy enough. Number 3, 4, and 5, I think, are pretty explanatory, so I'm not even going to touch on them. But number 1 and number 2, you have to decide which is the definition of law of supply and which is the definition of law of demand. So if you search law of supply versus law of demand, it will give you an idea of which one is which. I'm going to let you guys figure this left side out because, like I said, number 3 says, a mismatch between supply and demand when the price is high. And then in parentheses, it says creating more supply than demand. So when you have more supply than demand, what do you have? Do you have a shortage? No. Is it equal? No. You have a surplus, right? So number 3 is when a surplus is when there's a mismatch between supply and demand when the price is high, and that creates more supply than demand. Nobody wants to buy it. It stays on the shelves because the price is high. So it stays on the shelves, so there's a surplus of that thing. For number 4, it's the opposite. It's the mismatch between supply and demand when the price is low. So now all of a sudden things go on sale. Everybody wants them. The demand goes up, right? So what happens? There's a shortage. When something goes on sale, it's hard to get it because that demand goes way up and it becomes a shortage of that material. So that's what we're talking about there. So I'll stay away from the left side, even though I just gave you 2 of those answers. This is why you should keep looking at my live stuff. All right, look at the right, because the right, and it's funny, I've done this with a few classes already, and I'm getting messages from kids at night saying, I don't understand this right side, this worksheet is really weird, I don't get it, you have to help me, blah, 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 blah. I did help them in the video, and they didn't watch. So, what I got going on. If you hear something in the background, that's my kids and my wife, and we're all at school and work, so it's a little bit hectic. But hopefully it's not too much of a distraction. So the right side of this sheet is a supply shifter. What a shifter is a variable that changes something, right? So it shifts it. So what would shift the supply? And then down below that, it's what variable would shift or change the demand? So when you look at the supply, we're using dog, by the way, in the directions it says we're using dog food as an example, right? So now we're going to use dog food. He used milk in the video. We're going to use dog food as an example. Now, supply shifters, variables that change supply. Imagine you are a person and your business is to make dog food, right? So now you are the business owner making dog food. How would the supply shift? Would you have an oversupply in a situation, or would you have an undersupply in a situation? Okay. So if the first one says price of resources, if you're making dog food, you're obviously making it with chicken and with maybe gravy and with something else, right? This is all ingredients in your product. If the price of chicken goes up, then your product is going to have, you're going to have to pay more money to get the chicken to put in your product, right? That's going to affect your supply. If you have a warehouse, where you have 100 bags of dog food, right, or whatever, 1,000, 10,000, whatever it is, and you have a warehouse that has all this dog food, and all of a sudden the price of chicken goes up, you're going to say, wait a second, I'm not going to spend all this money, extra money on chicken. It's going to affect my profit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let my supply dwindle down a little bit. I'm going to let my supply go down to 50 bags before I make more. And hopefully the price of chicken will go down by then, right? So that changes your supply. You drop your supply because the price of chicken goes up, right? Also, if the price of chicken goes up, you have to charge more for your dog food, right? If you have to charge more for your dog food, and I know that I paid $10 for it last month and now it's 20, I ain't going to buy it. So now that I didn't buy it, you still have more sitting on the shelves. So your supply goes up, right? So that's the sort of relationships that we want to talk about here. So the number of manufacturers, let's look at number 2. The number of manufacturers. You are the guy that's making dog food and you have dog food and you're selling it to the pet store down the street. And you've been friends with this pet store forever, and this pet store carries your dog food and your dog food only, right? That's wonderful. So what you're doing is you're making a lot of dog food because everyone that goes down to that pet store is buying your dog food. What happens when 3 or 4 manufacturers say, hey, we're making dog food too. Can we put it in your store? And PetSmart or the place on the corner says, yeah, sure, bring it in. Now when a consumer comes in, they're looking at 5 different bags of dog food instead of just mine, right? So when there's someone that comes in and looks at 5, obviously your sales, right, the demand for your dog food is going to drop a little bit. If that happens, your supply is going to go up. You're going to have an oversupply of stuff in your warehouse because you're not getting rid of it, right? So that makes sense, right? Again, you can change that by saying I need to drop my supply instead of having, I've been selling 10 bags a month. Now I'm only selling 3, so I don't need to have too much of a supply, right? You'll either have an overstock or you have to adjust. That's the point there, right? Number 3, technology. This is a really easy example. And a lot of these can go both ways. Like I said, with number of manufacturers, if the manufacturers increase, right, your supply will increase because you're not selling as much. But with the number of manufacturers going up, you can also decide to lower your supply yourself, right? So it all depends on how you look at it and how you describe it, but understand the way it works. So number 3, with technology, when we look at technology, we say, okay, I'm making dog food and I sell it to the store down the street and the store across town and all that other stuff. But how do I get my dog food? Because I have a dog. How do I get my dog food? I buy it on Amazon. I subscribe on Amazon, and every month a bag of dog food shows up on my porch. I don't have to go shopping for it. I don't have to carry it. It's the same amount of money, right? So with technology comes a problem. When technology evolves, right, this becomes good or bad. It all depends on how you look at it. If I'm the guy making dog food, and now they don't have to come and buy my dog food because they can just go online and order it, my supply is going to increase. I'm going to be overstocked because no one's buying my stuff, right? However, if I'm smart and I say, wait a second, I want to jump on the online game too, and I want to sell my dog food, not just at these pet stores down the corner, but I want to sell it to everyone. I just opened my business up worldwide. So now people all over the world can be buying my dog food. So all of a sudden, my supply, I would have to increase, right? I would have to increase my supply because the supply would go down because everybody would be buying it, right? So it's weird how that works. As a manufacturer, you increase your supply because the supply is dwindling and going down because everybody wants it, right? So it all depends on how you say it. I'm trying to say it both ways, and hopefully it's not too confusing. It all depends on how you look at it. None of this can be wrong, by the way. This is all just the way you perceive situations. I'm going to let you deal with taxes and market, but we go down to demand shifters. What variables would change the demand? So number 1, taste and preferences. Now you're in taste and preferences. Your dog food has to taste good. If it doesn't taste good, that's a problem, right? So a good tasting product will increase demand. It makes sense. Preferences also increase or decrease in demand, the demand. So preferences meaning what are the ingredients in your dog food, right? If the ingredients in your dog food are on a carcinogen list somewhere and cause cancer, that's going to drop the demand for your dog food because there are people that aren't going to buy it based on that, right? That also goes the other way too. There's a lot of celebrities and stuff that endorse things, right? Not just dog food, but there's celebrities that endorse things. When a celebrity or famous person or somebody endorses something, people tend to, oh wow, that must be good if so-and-so's endorsing it, and they go there. So that will run up demand. Look at I'm thinking of Conor McGregor, the fighter. He just came out with a whiskey. He has his own line of whiskey, right? And I'm sure it's whiskey like any other whiskey. I don't drink whiskey, but I'm sure it's, whatever. I'm sure it's decent. But because it's Conor McGregor as the face man, because he's selling it, people have a preference when they go to the liquor store and they think Conor McGregor is awesome. They look at the shelf, they see it, and they say, oh, I want that one, right? So there's tastes and preferences that drive up demand. If I was selling that whiskey, I'm sure it wouldn't be as successful. But Conor is, so all of a sudden people prefer it. That drives demand up. Number of consumers. How many people are consuming your product? So how many people are consuming this dog food, right? Dogs are huge. A lot of people have dogs. So that business probably wouldn't struggle too much. But if you're looking on a local level, my town is very dog friendly. It's very dog, almost creepy. Every year there's something called Dog Days of Summer, and the artists make statues of dogs and paint them, and they put them in they put them all along Main Street, and people bid on them, and they buy them, and all that money goes to a dog charity, and it's very nice. But my town has a ton of dogs in it, so if I am making dog food and I have a store here, or I'm selling to a store here, my demand in this town is going to go up because a lot of people are buying dog food. If I live in a city, if I live in a senior complex where they don't allow pets because it's all apartments or townhouses, that number of consumers is going to go down. So that's going to lower the demand for my product, right? That's what I mean. Price of related goods, number 3, that's really just substituting goods for dry. Oh, so that's stuff like storage containers and scoops. The prices of those will affect the demand for my dog food. So if there's a sale on 50-pound storage containers for dog food somewhere and a bunch of people buy them, well, when they buy these, they're going to have to buy the dog food to fill them as well. So that could drive the demand for my stuff up, right? If all of a sudden they come out with a dog food that you can, a different type of dog food, a raw dog food that's supposed to be better and it's cheap and all that stuff, that might drive the demand for my dog food down, right? So it all depends on the price of related goods as well, not just the price of the stuff that goes into your stuff, like chicken and all the ingredients. It's the price of the exterior stuff, of the stuff around it, scoops and containers and different types of dog food, wet food versus dry food. It all makes a difference, right? I'm going to let you deal with it. Well, income, I'm going to let you deal with market expectations on your own. Income just means, hey, the demand for certain kinds of dog food, if you make an expensive dog food, that demand isn't going to be as high in places where the incomes are lower, right? Nobody's going to spend $40 on dog food if they can't afford that. Whereas if you have a shop in wherever the heck it is, where everybody has tons of money, you can charge $50, $60 for a bag of dog food and people are going to buy it. So income drives demand. Income, if you have a dog food that you're selling for $50, you're not going to put it in a pet store in an area where nobody's going to buy it, right? So you have to look at the income of the areas, of the locations, and decide where you're going to put that in, right? So that makes sense. And I'm going to leave the market expectations up to you to look at. So hopefully that helped a little bit. Hopefully when you guys look at this later, some of you are watching, which is cool. That guy spoke so fast. Who? I didn't speak fast. That guy was annoying. Ooh, that's not nice. You guys are so funny. But you guys have to sign in, which you're doing every day. I love that. Continue doing the work. The good thing about this schedule now is that you're done with me until Thursday, right? I won't be posting any more work for you until I see you again Thursday. So it feels like it spreads things out for you guys. It makes things a little easier. I hope it does. It makes things a little easier for me too. I'm in the process of putting some grades in, so you'll see those popping up soon. If you have any issues, private message me. Oh, good. I'm glad, Kabir. That's awesome. Yeah, and tell people, because I'm telling you, people are texting, not texting, people are messaging me all night saying, I don't get this sheet. And it is confusing, but it's not confusing if you watch the funny guy with the big beard explain it, then it's easy. I'll be doing that. That'll give you incentive to check the videos out. I'll be sort of guiding you through a lot of these things and giving you the answers to a lot of stuff. Anyway, I'm going to go until I see you on Thursday at 10:30. No, what are we, period 6? Yeah, I'll see you at 10:30, 11 o'clock on Thursday. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Hope you're not too bored. I'm getting bored. It's getting a little crazy, but it'll be over soon. And I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.